Imagine a world where love knows no boundaries, a place where the colors of the rainbow dance freely, not just in the sky, but in every heart, every community, and every corner of faith. What happens when the Catholic Church, a centuries-old institution, faces the most modern challenge of all, reconciling its traditions with the undeniable truth of LGBTQ+ equality? Historical context and the Catholic Church's stance on LGBT issues. The relationship between the Catholic Church and the LGBT community has been long and often contentious, deeply rooted in both religious doctrine and broader cultural attitudes towards sexuality. This relationship is framed by historical, theological, and societal factors that have shaped the Church's teachings for centuries. To understand the current dynamics, we must delve into the Church's traditional stance on sexuality, how it has evolved over time, and the broader context of the Catholic community's response to the LGBT community. Early Christian and medieval teachings. The roots of Catholic teachings on human sexuality can be traced back to the early Christian era and medieval theological writings. Early Church Fathers, such as Saint Augustine of Hippo, were instrumental in shaping Christian doctrine on sexuality. For Augustine, sexuality, even within marriage, was primarily for procreation, and any sexual activity outside of this purpose was considered sinful. This view, which framed sex as morally permissible only within the bounds of heterosexual marriage, set the tone for the Church's stance on sexual morality for centuries. As Christianity spread across Europe during the medieval period, the Church became the central institution for moral and spiritual guidance, reinforcing these views on sexuality. Homosexual acts were classified as a grave sin, a position reinforced by the writings of Saint Thomas Aquinas, who followed the Aristotelian philosophy of natural law, which posited that the natural purpose of sex was reproduction. For centuries, this view held sway in the Catholic Church, and homosexuality was considered an unnatural act that violated divine law. During this time, many Catholic theologians also took a strict approach to other forms of sexuality outside heterosexual marriage, including contraception and adultery. The Catholic Church emphasized the sanctity of marriage as between one man and one woman, while also firmly rejecting any sexual acts outside the procreative purpose. Renaissance and Enlightenment, the seeds of change. As Europe entered the Renaissance and the Enlightenment periods, ideas about individual rights, personal freedom, and scientific understanding began to challenge traditional Church teachings. The Enlightenment, in particular, ushered in a new wave of secular thinking, which advocated for personal liberty and the separation of church and state. As the intellectual atmosphere shifted, debates surrounding human rights began to influence Catholic views on many social issues, including sexuality. Though these new ideas did not directly challenge the Church's teachings on same-sex relations, they created an environment in which individuals began to question long-held societal norms. During this time, homosexuality was still considered a moral failing or a sin, but ideas of personal liberty and self-expression slowly began to permeate broader Western thought. In the 19th century, the emerging fields of psychology and psychiatry began to examine sexual behavior more systematically, and homosexuality began to be viewed as a medical condition rather than a moral failing. This shift in perspective did not immediately affect Catholic doctrine, but it did set the stage for the eventual rethinking of the Church's stance on sexuality. The 20th century, a time of tension. The 20th century saw significant changes in societal views on sexuality. In the aftermath of World War II, Western societies began to experience a rapid cultural transformation, especially during the sexual revolution of the 1960s. This period was marked by increased awareness and acceptance of diverse sexual orientations, as well as a broader push for civil rights. The LGBT rights movement gained momentum, with individuals demanding equality and an end to the discrimination and stigmatization they faced. In response to these social changes, the Catholic Church continued to uphold its traditional teachings on homosexuality, with official pronouncements from the Vatican condemning same-sex relations. The Church's position remained largely unchanged even as other religious and secular institutions began to reconsider their views on LGBT rights. The 1980s AIDS crisis, the Church's pastoral response. The AIDS crisis in the 1980s marked a pivotal moment in the Church's relationship with the LGBT community. HIV/AIDS disproportionately affected gay men, and the epidemic became one of the most significant public health crises of the century. While the Catholic Church's official teachings on homosexuality remained firm, many Catholic leaders, particularly in large cities such as New York and San Francisco, began to respond to the crisis with compassion and care. In the early years of the epidemic, many Catholic organizations, including hospitals and outreach programs, provided care and support for those affected by AIDS, including many LGBT individuals. Although the Church continued to regard homosexuality as sinful, it was forced to confront the human suffering caused by the AIDS epidemic and respond in a pastoral manner. This period marked the beginning of a more nuanced approach to LGBT issues within certain parts of the Church. However, the Vatican's official position on homosexuality remained firmly opposed to same-sex sexual activity. While the pastoral care provided to AIDS patients reflected compassion and charity, it did not signal a change in the Church's theological stance. Recent developments in the Church's changing approach. As we move into the 21st century, the Catholic Church's approach to LGBT issues has become more complicated and nuanced. Pope Francis, who ascended to the papacy in 2013, has played a pivotal role in changing the tone of the Church's relationship with the LGBT community. Although Pope Francis has consistently reaffirmed the Church's official teaching on marriage and sexuality, his more compassionate tone and openness to dialogue have created a more welcoming environment for LGBT individuals within the Church. Pope Francis, the Pope of Mercy and Dialogue. Pope Francis is perhaps best known for his emphasis on mercy, compassion, and inclusion. He has spoken out against judgmental attitudes within the Church and emphasized the importance of meeting people where they are, especially those marginalized by society. In 2016, Pope Francis famously stated, "If someone is gay and seeks the Lord with goodwill, who am I to judge?" This statement was revolutionary in the context of Catholic teachings on homosexuality, as it signaled a shift away from condemnation toward understanding. Pope Francis' approach to LGBT individuals has been focused on pastoral care and love. He has advocated for the Church to create spaces where LGBT people can feel accepted, without altering the official stance on same-sex relationships. This position is controversial, as it seeks to reconcile doctrinal orthodoxy with pastoral inclusion. Under Pope Francis, there has been increased outreach to LGBT Catholics, particularly those struggling with issues of identity and sexuality. Several dioceses and parishes across the United States and Europe have developed programs that offer support and counseling to LGBT individuals, allowing them to engage with their faith without fear of exclusion. Despite Pope Francis' emphasis on compassion, his approach has sparked significant backlash from conservative factions within the church. Many bishops and clergy members in more traditional regions of the world argue that any relaxation of the Church's stance on homosexuality threatens the integrity of Catholic doctrine. As a result, the global Catholic Church remains divided on the issue, with some embracing the Pope's message of mercy and others pushing back against what they see as an unacceptable shift. The global divide: America's Catholic Church and the LGBT community. In the United States, the debate over LGBT inclusion within the Church has been particularly intense. American Catholics are divided on the issue, with some dioceses actively supporting LGBT inclusion while others resist any change. This divide is especially evident when it comes to the question of same-sex marriage, which remains prohibited by the Catholic Church. Many Catholic leaders in the U.S. are torn between the Vatican's teachings and the growing acceptance of LGBT rights in American society. In some regions, Catholic communities have rallied around LGBT causes, creating spaces for inclusion and pastoral support. In contrast, more conservative dioceses, particularly in the South and Midwest, have maintained a hardline stance on issues like same-sex marriage and the sanctity of marriage. Despite this division, there is growing support for LGBT equality among younger generations of Catholics in America. A 2018 study found that nearly 60% of young American Catholics supported same-sex marriage, reflecting a broader cultural shift toward acceptance of LGBT rights. This generational divide suggests that, over time, the Catholic Church in America may become more open to the idea of LGBT inclusion, particularly if younger Catholics continue to advocate for change. However, this shift is not inevitable. The influence of conservative Catholic groups, such as the Knights of Columbus, and the continued support of traditionalists within the Church means that the issue of LGBT inclusion will likely remain a contentious one for the foreseeable future. The future of Catholicism and LGBT rights in America. Looking ahead, the future of Catholicism and LGBT rights in America remains uncertain, but there are several trends that suggest the relationship between the Church and the LGBT community will continue to evolve. The question remains, will the Catholic Church ever fully embrace LGBT equality without altering its core doctrines, particularly the traditional teachings on marriage? A shift toward greater inclusion. There are growing signs that the Catholic Church may gradually embrace more inclusive practices, particularly as younger generations of Catholics advocate for LGBT rights. As social attitudes toward homosexuality continue to shift, the pressure on religious institutions like the Catholic Church to reconcile its teachings with modern understandings of human rights will only intensify. Young Catholics, who tend to support LGBT equality, will likely play a crucial role in pushing the Church to adopt more inclusive policies. Catholic organizations like Dignity USA are leading the way in advocating for LGBT inclusion, pushing for greater recognition of same-sex relationships and the full acceptance of LGBT Catholics within the Church. These organizations are increasingly gaining visibility and support from younger, progressive Catholics who are pushing for change. Challenges from conservative factions. Despite the momentum toward inclusion, conservative factions within the Church will likely continue to resist any significant change in doctrine. For traditionalists, the issue of marriage remains non-negotiable, and the idea of altering the Church's teachings on sexuality is seen as a theological betrayal. These groups are unlikely to back down from their stance on the sanctity of marriage and will continue to resist any move toward LGBT equality within the Church. The role of future popes in global dialogue. The future direction of the Catholic Church's approach to LGBT issues will largely depend on the leadership of future popes. The papacy is one of the most powerful positions within the Church, and a pope who is more open to LGBT inclusion could accelerate the process of change. However, a more conservative pope could reverse some of the progress made under Pope Francis, making the future direction of the Church uncertain. Global dialogue within the Church will also play a crucial role in determining the future of LGBT inclusion. In some regions of the world, such as Latin America and Africa, Catholic attitudes toward LGBT rights are less progressive, and any attempt to change Church teachings would face significant resistance. However, as global conversations around human rights continue to evolve, the Church will likely face increasing pressure to reconsider its position on sexuality and marriage.